3. You're live.
Hey everybody, and welcome to the 67th week of the Free Assange Online Vigil. My name is Andrew Smith, and I am joined this week by my special co-hosts Steve Poikonnen and Kendra Christensen. We have special guests with us, Eva Bartlett and Vanessa Beeley. But before we get into it, I did want to take a moment to go over the numbers with everybody. It is day 3,603 since the illegal and arbitrary detention of Julian Assange has started. It is day 557 since the WikiLeaks founder was trafficked out of the Ecuadorian embassy to Belmarsh prison following a $4.2 billion international monetary loan fund to the nation of Ecuador. We have 80 days until Judge Vanessa Beeley makes her decision on Julian Assange's extraordinary rendition hearing on January 4th, 2021. Today is day 1,228 of federal incarceration for whistleblower Reality Winner. But in good news, it is day 214 that Chelsea Manning has been free. She does have a Twitch stream that we like to promote, and that is XYChelsea87. She streams Thursdays, Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays, usually from 7 until 11. This week's call to action is pretty simple. It's just getting more people involved in the call to action and trying to grow the community of people that we have doing that. We ask you to share the links out for each call to action that's in there. We have 4 of them that are still up, including demanding a presidential pardon for Julian, as well as supporting Australian whistleblower David McBride. But with that, how are you doing today, Steve?
I'm fantastic, man. I'm a little bit I've been looking forward to this vigil all week. It's been absolutely crazy. I feel like somebody took my rage meter into the repair shop in order to like scale it up a little bit, because I wasn't fucking ready to be as angry as I was this week. And like every single day there was something else that was happening that was just overly authoritarian and ridiculous, and now here we are. So I'm hoping that this is going to be both informative and cathartic. And I'm also going to try and pronounce Kendra's last name right at some point in this stream. How are you, Kendra, by the way?
I'm good. It's just Christian. It's pretty easy. So I'm good. I've also been looking forward to this week and experiencing just, gut punches throughout the week like everybody else. So how are our guests today?
Yeah, I was gonna say with that, let's please bring in Vanessa Beeley and Eva Bartlett. These are like 2 of the most accomplished journalists that I've ever had the privilege of speaking to, and the amount of bullshit that has been heaped on them, not just this week, but over the years, the Philip crossing of everything that's been said about them on Wikipedia. It's just it's a testament to the fucking cartoon that we live in. I'm fucking over it. That's why they're getting a chance to say whatever the hell they want to today. So hello.
Yeah, it's Groundhog Day a lot of times for us. The same smears recycled over and over again.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, every single one of these smears just reads like a kind of Stasi charge sheet. Like a total neo-McCarthy, I don't know, like send them to the colonies type attack, extraordinary. I mean, these people never engage, honestly. They never engage with the intention of actually informing or educating their audiences. They just maintain a narrative. That's it.
So like when you got this, email, have you ever received anything like that before? Or this is a first, and this is like an escalation. Just kind of walk us through like what happened there and how that was like. I mean,
well, sorry, did you say that to Eva or to me?
To you, sorry. Both actually.
Yeah, I mean, it was effectively pretty much copy and paste, I think, for the start of the email. And I sort of skimmed through it pretty lazily because, as Eva said, this is pretty much exactly what we've received from Huffington Post, from the Times, the Guardian, etc., etc. But then I hit this final paragraph, which was, well, we've been speaking to an international rights lawyer, and because you've designated the white helmets a legitimate target, you might be liable under humanitarian international law for prosecution, basically. Okay, it's not a direct legal threat, but it's a ramping up of the intimidation and the psychological warfare against people that are exposing UK and US coalition war crimes globally, not only in Syria, globally. And so, yeah, initially that was a little bit of a kind of, you know, took my wind away. I immediately spoke to Whitney, who was just brilliant, and like she went straight into kind of rage monster mode and contacted everyone, who also then went into this fantastic kind of, including Steve. So thanks, Whitney, because, you know, she just took over, really. But actually, that's one thing I want to say, you know, as powerful as this machine is, as powerful as the BBC is, we are also powerful. And I think that's been demonstrated this week just on social media, on platforms like Ryan's, like Steve's, like Graham Elwood. All these people just immediately came into support. And I think that's something, just as the UK Foreign Office underestimated, as did the US, the unity and the cultural heritage of the Syrian people. And I know Eva will agree with me on this. I think the BBC and all these kind of media conglomerates also underestimate our unity and our ability to come together and to fight back. And we have the public behind us. Particularly on Syria, we have the public behind us now. We have public consensus behind us, and that's been demonstrated on the social media platforms since the BBC launched this attack.
Yeah, and if I could add on to that, I mean, since, you know, for years we've been reporting from Syria. So this isn't 2016 when some of the initial smears started. This is 20. I think the most important thing we do, I mean, this is by far the expert on the white helmets, but I think one of the most important things we've done and really tried to do is give voice to Syrians who've been marginalized by the same media, which is quite ironic because in the emails they sent to us, you know, they're trying to imply that we're impartial and that we go to Syria with a narrative, when it's in fact time and again the BBC, the Guardian, and all these state or corporate funded outlets that go there with their narrative, and they deliberately ignore Syrians because it doesn't fit their narrative. And as Vanessa was saying, every time there is one of these smears, it actually does just grow our followers or the awareness of, you know, the kind of reporting we're doing. So I find it hard to believe the BBC and Guardian wouldn't anticipate that. But anyway, it's one of the byproducts. But, you know, Vanessa's received, I would say, a lot more smears in recent years. But one we did share was in 2017, when the Guardian took a tech and shoe fashion writer and had her email both of us. And at the point, I think the similarities are the completely hostile tone of the email and the questions she had for us, the implication that we're receiving money from the Russian government other than as we receive per op-ed piece, and the implication that we're being used as mouthpieces for either the Syrian or Russian government, when in fact, every time, I would say, if I can speak on Vanessa's behalf, every time both of us has gone to Syria, it's been on our own dime, or in some instances crowdfunded or supported by people on Patreon or PayPal, etc. And you know, the views that we're putting out there are the views of Syrians, again, who you won't hear in corporate media. And finally, also the other point is that they think the BBC, the Guardian, whomever it is that are doing these smears, think that the general public is stupid. And as Vanessa was saying, well, no, actually, people understand what's going on, and it's just making the BBC seem more antiquated and irrelevant than ever.
That's what kills me about this, because the accusations against both of you historically are so outlandish and over the top, and all you've really done is go to the place where the thing is happening and talk to the people who live there. Like that is some sort of journalistic crime. Like as a reporter, you're somehow not supposed to talk to the people who live there. You're supposed to talk to the people who live thousands of miles away, who work for a think tank or who work for an opposing government. And that's the only way you can get a real picture of what's going on the ground in Syria. It's so counterintuitive and so mind-numbingly stupid that only a corporate media outlet could think that way.
Yeah, and I mean, I actually, because I'm still communicating with Chloe Hadjimatio, the BBC producer, because I've picked up on a few, let's say, interesting papers that she's written, and I'm asking her a few questions about her background, her work, her funding, etc. And she's responding, give her a due, she's coming back. Of course, she's obfuscating. Of course, she's being probably given the response to give to me by the higher ups, and the shadow state, the BBC shadow state, which of course is British intelligence. Basically she admitted, I actually asked her, I said, have you ever actually been into Syria? And she said, no, I visited it before the war, but I've never entered Syria since the war began. So in other words, for this upcoming program, they've not gone into Syria. They've not spoken to any of the Syrian civilians who are accusing the White Helmets of organ trafficking, child abduction, persecution, torture, detention, etc. But in her email to me, she basically dismissed those claims. Now, they're not my claims, as Eva said, they're not my claims. Right? They are the claims of Syrian civilians who lived under the occupation of the terrorist groups and their White Helmet auxiliaries. They are the ones making the accusations against the White Helmets. So what Chloe and the BBC are basically doing are completely pushing those people out of the way, dehumanizing them, ignoring them, and marginalizing them exactly as they have done throughout the war against Syria for the last 10 years. And this is, this isn't journalism. She talks to me about how I'm not a proper journalist because I'm not rigorous. This is a woman who's produced now 2 documentaries on Syria without entering the country.
Well, and Vanessa, you didn't go to the proper school. Yeah, I mean, she did make a point to iterate that your secondary education was lacking the proper credentials, and therefore you can't be. I know, but
you know what, Steve? I mean, what cracks me up is they keep throwing this at me and Eva, right? Obscure blogger, you're not a journalist, but they keep attacking us. Like, if we're so obscure, if we're so utterly pointless in the scheme of things, why has Chris York, for example, written in the region of about 20 articles trying to diss me? Haven't they got something better to do than focus on an obscure blogger that's just being kind of amplified a bit by Russia and Syria?
Well, and that's a good point. Why now? Haven't they got something better to do than to rehash this old theme of white helmets being valiant rescuers? Surely the BBC could devote its resources to some other groundbreaking investigative journalism. But I mean, I think one is the likelihood that the white helmets could stage another fake chemical attack. So discredit the
There's that, and yeah. Absolutely. And I think a lot of it is damage limitation, because I think, I mean, with the falling apart of the Duma chemical attack and the exposure of the OPCW as a completely fraudulent, compromised organization producing fake reports to justify UK, US and French unlawful aggression against Syria, the fact that James Le Mesurier was found to have been committing fraud, embezzling money from Mayday Rescue, the fact that the Dutch government stopped funding Mayday Rescue because it believed that Mayday Rescue couldn't give assurances that the funds were not going to the terrorist groups inside Syria. So there's a huge backlog of evidence that's about to avalanche the entire white helmet construct out of existence. So to some degree, the British government and the BBC, I think, has to now go into this damage limitation exercise to try and somehow protect its entire war effort. Because the white helmets since 2013 are the ones, and there are British documents, British government documents, proving that they essentially rely almost entirely on the white helmets to corroborate the evidence they need to continue with their military adventurism in Syria. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right to ask that question, and I think the only thing you can put it down to is damage limitation.
Had Chloe made mention at all about the OPCW whistleblowers and the staging of the chemical attacks in Syria in 2018?
No,
Not to me.
although she had the conversation with Paul McKeek of the working group on Syria media and propaganda, and he's actually published the transcript of their conversations, which is quite interesting.
I wanted to ask, because it does seem like the way that Chloe structured these emails, it was a bit of a cut and paste job. And I just wanted to get immediate reactions from both of you on, at least in my opinion, the unmitigated gall of someone who works for a state-funded television outlet like the BBC, or a state-funded radio outlet like BBC4, leveling an accusation at both of you that isn't true, by the way, that you work for a state-funded media outlet like RT, for example.
Yeah, I mean, I've been doing activism and journalism since 2007 in occupied Palestine. And I wrote for a number of independent sites until maybe 2013, maybe 2014, when I first started contributing opinion pieces to RT. And as you noted, that does not constitute being employed by RT. And there's, just like with any op-ed section, there's a disclaimer at the bottom of each piece saying that our views, the views of the author, does not necessarily reflect that of RT. But this is not the first time that state hack would try to imply that we're employed by RT. This has been kind of the theme of many smears past. And it's just one of many things, like, for example, the calling us conspiracy theorists or Assadist, or, you know, the various terms that they've come up with, some of them specific to Syria, in terms, like, in order to denigrate our name, without ever actually really looking, especially with regard to Vanessa's work on the White Helmets, without looking in depth at the things that she's produced. It's simply smear her character. And one of the main themes is to say that you're employed by RT. But when we started writing White Helmets, you're from 21st Wire, which is an independent news site. And I was trading to Sud.net, Global Research, all independent news sites. And I've been kind of reviewing prior smears, knowledge, and from my research, didn't really pick up on the White Helmets until 2016 or 17, whereas journalists in North America were reporting that. So it's still a phobic theme of Western media and pundits that they use to under what we have to say, like, illegitimate.
Vanessa, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to ask Eva, because I had seen a interview that you had done. I think it was back in June, and it was actually even with people, these major news outlets who even did end up on the ground in Syria that were, then witnessing things, but then not necessarily reporting on what they were actually seeing. I was wondering if you could speak to that too.
Sorry, it's cutting out a bit. I didn't hear the full question there.
Okay, I had seen a video where you had you were talking about people from the major news organizations that were on the ground in Syria witnessing some of the same things, but then reporting differently than what they had seen on the ground. I was just wondering if you did that too, because that seems to me even a whole nother level of deception, really, because, you know, if you're not there, that's one thing, you know, but then when you're there,
Yeah.
so.
Well, the first example I can give is from April 2014, when terrorists occupying eastern Ghouta shelled old Damascus, and they were doing this on a daily basis with mortars and missiles, heavily shelling the city for years and years and years. And they chose, particularly they chose times when civilians, children, women, etc., were in the streets, walking to school, walking to markets. On this day in April 2014, they shelled a school in the old city, the Manar School. And I ended up at the hospital, the French hospital, with some other activists, taking footage of the injured children, just trying to get a sense of how many were injured, you know, how badly they were injured, trying to show what had happened. And who was there but the BBC's Lise Doucet. And so she had a conversation with somebody else there, and I filmed that conversation. And at that time, the other person was asking her, are you going to tell the truth? What's happening here? And she was making it very clear that the children were injured and one killed, like 60 kids injured and one killed, by a bomb that was fired from east of Damascus, eastern Ghouta. So Lise Doucet was nodding, and I have this in my YouTube, her kind of nodding along, yes, yes, I'll tell the truth. She later wrote an article, something titled like Russian roulette, something or other. I'm going to say something like the regime accuses Eastern firing the city, but locals believe it's the regime. I'm using her words, not mine. And this is extremely disingenuous, because anybody that spent any time in Damascus, you know, during the period up to 2018, when it was liberated, knows that everybody in Damascus knows where those missiles and mortars were coming from, because they suffer from it daily. So it's not that Lise Doucet did not know, but she wanted to basically pull the wool over the eyes of her readers and imply that it was really difficult to do, because this is whitewashing the crimes of the terrorists in East Ghouta, and at the same time vilifying the Syrian government. That's one example. In November 2016, I was part of a media group in Aleppo. I'd already been there a couple of times, but there were journalists from the New York Times, LA Times, the BBC, and a handful of others. Now, I don't offhand remember what the BBC said. I need to look that up or reported, but I do remember during the 3 days that this media team was in Aleppo, or media delegation, the city was shelled heavily by terrorists in east of the city. I think it was 200 people were injured, a number killed, 14 killed, I believe it was. Anyway, it was heavy shelling, quite traumatic. Seeing the families, the loved ones of those who had died at the morgue behind the Razi hospital, hearing their, you know, wailing of mourning. And later, the New York Times, Anne Barnard wrote, she wrote about that hospital scene, but then she had to go and cite the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights based in the UK on some alleged strike by Syria or Russia somewhere else in Syria that day. So she had to equate the immense suffering we'd all seen at the hospital with something unsubstantiated by this anti-Syria crime in the UK.
Yeah. And actually, if I can just add to that, two things that came into my mind as Eva was speaking. First of all, I was actually one of the few Western journalists on the ground in Aleppo during the final liberation in November and December 2016. And at this point, the UN actually, I believe, started the rumor that the Syrian Arab Army soldiers were raping the women in the liberated areas. and looting and stealing, but particularly the rape story was picked up by the likes of The Guardian. Owen Jones ran with it. A huge number of mainstream journalists ran with it, and I'm standing in the streets watching the Syrian Arab army literally carrying old ladies down from the top floor of damaged buildings, giving them cups of tea and food, breaking down in tears because for many of them, they hadn't been able to see their own families in East Aleppo because, of course, it had been under occupation by the armed groups. So many of these soldiers, which actually the majority were with the Liwa al-Quds brigades, ironically, the Palestinian brigades, many of whom had families in this area. So most of them were literally breaking down in tears and hugging family members that they hadn't seen for 5 years. And this was being distorted by mainstream media that were not even on the ground at this time, and by the UN, into the fact they were raping the women that they were liberating, that they'd given their lives to liberate, that they'd given their blood to liberate their own families, their own homes. And the second one, which has an element of kind of comedy to it, but is still pretty serious, was just before the Douma chemical attack. I was in Damascus, and we'd gone on a kind of media tour, and on that tour was Frederick Poikonnen of CNN. And I made sure that I filmed every interview he made. I basically traipsed around after him to see what he was doing, which he didn't like at all. But basically during that tour, we got taken to at least 2 or 3 laboratories that were manufacturing chemical weapons, chlorine grenades. There were all kinds of chemical weapon manuals, how to make them, how to fill the grenades, how to fill the missiles. We saw a huge number of ammunition, munitions factories, etc. And we were together on this tour. Now, the next day, the Douma chemical attack happened, the alleged chemical attack. Poikonnen was standing there as CNN anchor about 3 kilometers from Douma, and absolutely point blank said it looks as if it's the Syrian government attacking its own people again. No mention of what he'd seen the day before that I'd seen with him. Even we saw cylinders, exactly the same cylinders, the yellow cylinders, like the ones that miraculously fell through the roof and didn't break the bed and didn't knock the ornaments off the wall, etc. Right. We saw a whole store of those very close to the area that was supposedly hit by the chemicals. Now, I questioned this on his Twitter account, and he immediately blocked me. So those are the 2 instances that I can talk about. There are others also, clearly. One particular point, Lise Doucet, who Eva mentioned, I happened to have quite a lengthy conversation with her in Damascus at one point, and I asked her why the BBC wasn't investigating the White Helmets. Her response was because they're too controversial and they're too polarizing. So this is a media outfit avoiding controversy and avoiding, like, basically a pretty big story for political reasons. That was clear. That was a political answer. It wasn't a media answer.
I just realized I was muted.
Actually, I would recommend everyone reading Sharmeen Nawani, because Sharmeen absolutely blew apart the early narratives in Syria. She was one of the first journalists from, I think, 2011 onwards, Eva, who was there reporting on what was going on. Like, for example, the Yarmouk camp, the Latakia stories early on of apparently the Syrian Navy shelling Latakia. All of the early stories were kind of exposed as false flags by Sharmeen Nawani. So I would recommend that everyone check her out for like a really comprehensive view of the falsehoods put out by a number of media outlets from 2011 onwards.
Yeah, and she actually, in 2018, I don't remember if it was April or when, but she was in Syria, and I remember her saying, and I believe she wrote about it. Yeah, I know she wrote about it, being in Eastern Ghouta and visiting what looked to be a chemical lab there, and she expressed that the Western media that was on that delegation has, if I recall, none of them changed whatsoever in going there and writing about what Charlie's seeing. But yeah, she's definitely she's written The Hidden Massacre, I think the one about Palestinians in Syria, the Palestinian the Syria conflict is very, very well known. Particularly when the Syria issue has been so divisive, and many people who are supportive of Palestine have not been supportive of war imperialism in Syria, because they've got messages on Palestine. But Charmaine's article really gathered that there's considerable support from Palestinians within Syria in liberating Syria and returning it to peace.
Oh, you're muted, Kendra.
We're all trying so hard to be polite.
Don't bother.
I was just wondering if you guys.
Well, I mean,
oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead, Kendra.
No. I was just gonna see what you guys kind of, your thoughts around this tightening up and this, this acceleration of censorship that we've seen just even over the past couple weeks. And I'm wondering if you guys see this as a sign of weakness on the part of the narrative.
Eva?
I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to try to sign back in. My neck is really sketchy and I couldn't hear most of your question.
And if you want to, Eva, do it. Try it without the camera, and your audio might come through a little bit more clear.
Without camera?
Yeah, or like lower quality on the camera. There's a couple of different ways. We would love to see you though.
Anyway, you go ahead and I'll try to. I just sign out and sign back in. Maybe that would help.
Everybody's looking at me like I should shut up.
No, not at all.
So while we wait for Eva to hop back in, could you talk a little bit, Vanessa, about the historical contribution that WikiLeaks made about the situation in Syria, especially around the civil war?
Yeah, I mean, WikiLeaks has been instrumental. I mean, most recently, of course, they released the documents appertaining to the case against the OPCW, and the information provided by the experts and members of the investigative team that didn't kind of comply with the needs of the OPCW handlers, as I said, to justify their unlawful aggression and the criminalization of the Syrian government and its allies. So WikiLeaks was instrumental in that. Also, going back, you might need to actually jog my memory on the documents that were released through, I think the DIA document was released through WikiLeaks, is that correct? The Department of Intelligence Agency document? Yeah, correct? Everyone's looking at me completely blank.
Sorry, I was.
No, I think that was in Cablegate. It was either in Cablegate or the Syria files. I can't remember which.
Yeah,
there's like 10 million documents that all kind of, swirling.
But yeah, certainly, that's the thing. I mean, there have actually been so many leaks that have demonstrated to what extent this conflict was being orchestrated and planned long before it actually came to fruition in 2011. And WikiLeaks, of course, has been instrumental in providing that kind of information that enables us to understand the machinations of the deep state, let's say, and of the ruling classes in putting together these plans. I mean, if we go back to 2003 and the Blair-Bush communiques that were revealed by the Chilcot report into the weapons of mass destruction and the whole kind of false premises for the war against Iraq, which of course was supported by the BBC. We can see that Blair back then was talking about trying to create a special relationship with President Assad. Of course, that would be based upon him relinquishing his defense of Palestine, accepting the Turkey-Qatar pipeline, kicking Hezbollah out of Syria, etc., etc. And of course, you know, in history, we will know why this war started is because President Assad didn't abandon his principles and he maintained his integrity, and he stood by his allies, which are Iran and Russia and Hezbollah. But WikiLeaks, I think, you know, I don't think we can ever be thankful enough to what WikiLeaks has exposed and the background or the context to what we're seeing on the ground has come from organizations like WikiLeaks. And I think I was watching today the Miko Pellet debate with Roger Waters. Did you watch that? Did you see Roger Waters?
God. Oh my God!
Oh my God! I mean, he was off the radiometer, right?
Oh, I fucking needed that so bad. When Roger Waters broke into his "I'm going to play the judge now," do we have that clip, Josh?
I forgot to clip it out. I'm sorry.
Fantastic.
I forgot.
Please have
Okay,
it.
there's a tweet of it, and I'm gonna go find it, and I'm gonna
Please,
tag you in it so you can play it. But oh my God, dude! So like half of this week I was working by myself, which is a fucking gift to me because I operate better that way, I think. But like nobody can give me shit about what I'm listening to, and I got to listen to that live, and oh, dude, that carried me for like most of my day. It was just brilliant. It was. I'm gonna go find that like right now. So I'm going to.
No, I mean it was. You talk about the radiometer, but I think.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
She did say that her battery was running lower at like 3/4 strength and she might drop out.
Ah, bummer.
Well, hopefully she can rejoin us. Are you still with us, Eva?
Oh no. It's pandemonium.
We didn't plan on internet issues.
We
Kevin!
do a lot of the folks.
I swear, I think Evo was one of the first vigils I did, and it was Kevin as hell.
Yeah, no, it definitely was. That was very, very early on.
Okay, I just put the Roger Waters thing in the Jitsi chat, Josh.
I can't get to the Jitsi chat.
I'll put it in Element 2 then. Jesus.
I don't want the chat showing up on the stream.
Fair enough. There's never anything in the chat though. Oh, and I need to send a link to Allison Mason too, because she was going to come on and tell us about the being chased off by the cops and the Streisand effect that had
Nice.
on the Free Assange protest in Trafalgar or Piccadilly, I think. Either Trafalgar or Piccadilly. I can't remember which. We do it live every fucking single time. You guys have no idea. Like, we've even tried to have like meetings about this shit and like get our stuff squared away. No.
It always works out so well.
Not how this shit's gonna roll. Eva's trying to reboot. So hopefully we hear back from her.
I think we may have.
Oh, yeah.
We have a Vanessa. Welcome back.
Oh, but I think you're muted.
You are muted. One more time.
Tap the screen once if you're on a phone, and then tap the unmute button, and it'll pop up at the bottom.
For that.
Come on.
Who was it that randomly hung up on us the other day? That was like trying to unmute themselves and just disconnected. Who was that?
I don't even know. You're still muted though, Nessa. I wish we could do this on our end.
Yeah, I don't know.
Who's...
Yeah, it goes against the WebRTC standard. They don't allow that.
Right.
There should be a button that looks like a mic.
Yeah, if you're on the phone.
I think she said fuck it.
Popping up.
She's gonna relog in.
Come back in, yeah. I'm just so, it's just insane hearing all of these, stories just back to back about, just deliberately lying about what's going on there. It's just, I mean, that's the whole point of, all of the wars, all of them started by lies. The people wouldn't want any of that, and here you are with the Syrian people. Just, I don't know. I'm so grateful to people like Vanessa and Eva for reporting honestly, just being decent people.
Well, and here's the thing, and here's why they're in trouble. It's because they're giving the people of Syria a voice. Right. They're not saying, I'm looking at this from 8 countries away, trying to give you my opinion about this. They're giving the people on the ground a voice, and that's something that that the West can't tolerate. Like, to the point to where they'll try to destroy the careers, if not lives, of the people who are giving Syrians a voice in this issue. And that's also what Julian Assange has done through giving so many people a voice. Mm-hmm. And the reaction on the part of powerful governments when you give everyday ordinary citizens a voice is just this visceral hatred and shit, man. We're happy to do something about that. We are. You're still muted, Vanessa. I don't know what's up.
I've got that.
If you hit the center of the screen, on the left-hand side of the bottom of it, there should be a little circle that looks like a microphone. If you hit that, it should, if you're on a phone. If you're on a laptop, you have to click it.
I think she's on a phone.
I think so.
Do you want me to play that video, Steve?
Oh, yeah. Let's give that a shot.
Hello.
Oh, there's Eva.
Sorry about
Hey,
that.
we're gonna try and play the Roger Waters rage clip here real quick and see how that rolls, because it's wonderful, and then we'll go back to our regularly scheduled mayhem.
One sec. This is a total pain.
See, I thought you were ready, so I announced it. No, I fucking.
He has it up on the screen.
Come on, Poikonnen.
5, 4.
I thank them both for reiterating. I've heard it many, many times before, because I live in your world. I live in the world that we live in. The 5 of us sitting here today, we live in a world that most people do not inhabit, sadly. If people lived in our world, this program is called, I've just looked at it up here, The Trial of Julian Assange. If most people lived in the world that you and I inhabit, it would go something like this. It wouldn't, Vanessa, whatever name, Beretzer is her name, who is the judge who will decide upon Julian Assange's fate on her fucking own, this woman. If she wasn't the judge, if I was the judge, and if the world understood all the things that Ray and John and Miko and Roger understand, it would go something like this, and I'm quoting myself here now. It would go, the evidence before the court is incontrovertible. There's no need for the jury to retire. Case dismissed. And that would be the fucking end of it. Because this is such a put-up kangaroo court piece of bollocks that none of us should be taking it even faintly seriously. So our dilemma here is that we have to, because it's the reality of our lives. Vanessa Beeley will do her thing. Obviously, in January, she's going to come out, or she's going to sit between now and January. And we all knew what she was going to write 6 months ago. It's a complete charade.
All right.
Ah, God damn, I love that. I do. And okay, look, there's a part of me that was, 14 years old and on acid when The Wall played. And I remember very specifically like that particular voice coming at me.
Right.
But holy fuck, dude. Oh, it's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, he fucking nails it. He literally says everything that we have been saying about this case since the very beginning. It's Kevin Gostola's "we shouldn't even have to be here today" statement, that like this shouldn't have to happen to have to be covered. Like it's the trial of journalism, and it's fucking disgusting.
Did we lose both of them again? God damn it.
I think we did. Also, it's the conclusion that everybody comes to when they just sit there and read the material or go through like one day of the testimony, for the defense, which is like what we're talking about here. That's why it's such a big deal to just quiet it up. We don't want people to know. We don't want people to know about the war crimes that are coming out in this case now, just like we don't want anybody to know what's really going on in Syria, live, what's happening now when there's still a chance to do something about it, That's just crazy. Oh, yay!
There we go.
Back.
Am I back? Can you hear me?
And you've got sound.
I have to download the app. I'm on the thingy mobile now.
Welcome back.
Welcome back.
Yeah. Did you get to hear any of the Roger Waters bit while all that fuckery was going on?
I missed it.
To you. I'll send it to you. But no, if you get time, which I don't have any, so I'm not going to expect anyone else to have time. But if you get time, I would definitely watch the entire panel.
Oh no, I did watch it. I was fascinated by it, actually, and I think the one thing that John Pilger said in that was that the genius of Julian Assange was to create this platform, where whistleblowers could drop this information without fear of retribution, in theory, of course. And I think it was Ray McGovern that said that even the CIA kind of admitted grudgingly that, Julian Assange always maintained a certain neutrality. He never included opinion. It was always just the information, which is what makes it so insane that he's being tortured and incarcerated and everything else that he's having to endure, because effectively he's done what all of us are trying to do, in probably a way less effective way, to inform and educate people about what the ruling classes are doing, not only now abroad, but now, of course, the hybrid war machine has been turned on their own populations. And I think that's a very important point to be made. Everything, all the measures that have been taken against far-flung nations like Syria, like Libya, like Venezuela, Yemen. I mean, we're now seeing it being turned against home populations, domestic populations, food insecurity, economic sanctions, the creation of some kind of, existential threat, which is effectively going to allow them to bring in neo-feudalist regimes, convert the majority of the population into effectively serfs, and make them entirely dependent upon the state for every move they make. Soon our travel is going to be inhibited entirely. We're going to be force-fed vaccinations and God knows what. And this is very much what they've been doing to the so-called third world. you know, where they've been bringing their version of civilization. Well, we're about to get a taste of what that civilization is. And unfortunately, Julian Assange is suffering the brunt of their attacks against anyone that kind of drags them into the sunlight. And I think what is kind of interesting, if you like, with this BBC wording of their kind of semi-legal threat, is I think we're seeing now the emboldenment of state media, of all of these tools and instruments of power to turn against their own, effectively. I mean, this is a media outlet effectively threatening another journalist. And I think that's pretty unprecedented. But I also wanted to read something that John Pilger tweeted out today, because I think it demonstrates perfectly the kind of lawlessness that we're heading towards and the vast scale global insecurity, which of course we've seen anyway with all the violations of international law. But as I said, now what we're going to see is the same level of rogue state lawlessness, but in our own backyard kind of thing. And John Pilger tweeted out, I think it was yesterday, without opposition, the UK Parliament has legalised a lawless British state. Overseas Operations Bill allows soldiers to commit war crimes. The Covert Human Intelligence Sources Bill allows MI5 and others to secretly murder and torture those the BBC calls the bad guys. So yeah, I mean, I think it is a sign of desperation on one hand. On the other hand, I think it's a sign of this total kind of lawlessness, this Mad Max state that's heading our way, basically.
I've been thinking that too, just in the sense of it's like, you know, if it's not broke, don't fix it. And this has worked for them so many times that they're just doing it again and again. And I can only think that with the data that's there now, I always just, you know, I wonder if that's why we're seeing things just so brazen, because we've been fighting like crazy for a year, you know, well over a year now for Free Assange. And it's just, you know, it's so difficult, so hard to get interviews or, you know, media or anybody really fully on board. It's just and it's just sad. It's a it's a lot to work against.
Yeah, it's huge. You know, we're working against a huge machine. It doesn't actually matter what aspect of that is being persecuted or oppressed by that machine. It's very hard to be heard, because you're shouting into the wind, you're shouting into this kind of vast, you know, complex that can produce, and it can change shape, and it can change name, and it can, you know, just as you expose one, I always liken it to a kind of hydra. You cut off one head and another one grows back.
Well, that's why I think individual localized anti-propaganda efforts are so important. And that's why since the very beginning of the vigils, we've talked about the idea of like decentralized activism, like being the person to carry a message to your community saying, hey, this is truthful. Like, I'm not here getting paid by anyone. I'm here telling you what is actually happening in the world. And I think that that's really one of the only ways, the only truly effective ways to counter it, because once you start doing that, someone will say, hey, well, when are you meeting? And then you start to build this local campaign around proliferating truthful information, no matter what it is. Because we're at the time now where putting a poster on a telephone pole is going to get more views than it does on Twitter, just because of the censorship. And it's going to get seen by a wider audience.
Yeah.
Where I think we're going to enter an era where physical space becomes the message boards.
This is why I want to put cardboard Julian Assanges in the stands at like football games and hockey games and shit, because there's no audience now. There's no live audience for any of this shit, but you can have a cardboard cutout of yourself put in the stands, like that's how fucking cartoonish a COVID world is. But so if that's a thing, then we should be able to, for like $25 to $75, put cardboard Julian Assange all over the fucking stands, and I don't know if they're doing that with football in Europe, but if they are, holy shit, that would be fantastic. It would be. As far as like ridiculously absurd crowdfunding efforts go, I'm for it. I am. I'm just throwing it out there in case anybody wants to be like, fuck yeah, I got $75 to pop for a cardboard Julian Assange at, next week's fucking Raiders game. Like, yeah, dude, go God.
So Misty and I were talking in one of the group chats about setting up ideas like that, like, because we don't solicit donations unless we're actually planning an action or anything like that. So putting up a call to action where we get people to buy a Julian in a football stadium, or buy a billboard for $25 to have it up for 3 months, or things like buy an advertisement on a bus or in a newspaper, like things like that. So that's probably something that's going to be coming out here soon, is getting people making a monetary contribution in some way to put a larger effort forward, whether it's the Julian in the stands or billboards or what have you.
I have a question.
Yeah, that's.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I have a question. I was wondering, what's the media in Syria like?
That's a bit like the Galloway question.
Oh no. What did I do?
Oh no, I mean, look, Syria, I mean, it's hard to actually describe. I mean, actually, the Syrian journalists, I can't remember the total. I think it's something more than, I think it's over 200 journalists have lost their life in this war. And of course, they're never mentioned.
Yeah.
That is never, ever talked about. The majority have been killed on the front lines, like Khaled al-Khatib, in fact, who I think he was killed in 2016 on the front lines with ISIS. He was killed by an incoming shell while he was an anchor for RT. So the media here, it's severely, in my opinion, it's underfunded. It's not given enough support. I think maybe one of the mistakes that Syria has made, and to be fair, many countries have made, is not to understand the importance of the information war, and to what extent the information war enables war.
Right.
I mean, it's a very difficult. We kind of understand it because that's our job. We've been examining it and analyzing it for a very long time. So we understand how Western propaganda works. We understand how insidious it is. But in countries like Syria, there's a certain naivety, actually. There's a certain element of fighting fires and a reactionary element rather than a thinking ahead and a planning ahead. And of course, and actually a number of analysts and intellectuals here have actually written about this extensively. In the West, the strategy is planned years ahead of its implementation, right? Here, it's not really like that. Here people enjoy life. They love life. They live life. And they're not really thinking about all the disasters that could happen down the road, and I get it. I mean, they're living through a war. They're living through, not so much now, but before 2018, they were living a constant life or death situation, as Eva was describing, the incoming mortars and missiles and explosive bullets, the suicide cars, all manner of death really was hanging around the corner for them. But the media here has done a really good job. But of course, the problem is they're always marginalized, they're always ignored as being Syrian state media, and it's very hard to break through that barrier. And also, there are not many English channels here. Sana, which is a Syrian Arab news agency, they do have an English language website. And, you know, if you want to be updated on a daily basis on what's actually happening here, that's pretty good. But as far as YouTube, well, in fact, every single YouTube channel was taken down anyway. So the censorship has been huge against Syrian media, of course, as it is against Yemeni media, as it is against any of the resistance axis media. But, you know, they've done as good a job as they possibly can under the circumstances. And it's unfair to say that they're producing nothing but propaganda. I mean, for goodness sake, you know, when you look at what is being produced in the West, which is completely false narratives, false and misleading and lying by omission narratives, RT has been a lifesaver, because actually their reporting on the Syrian conflict has been pretty solid, as much as they are relying.
Sounds just like something a state-funded peddler of Russian talk. I can't even say it. I can't. Ahead of this BBC4 hit piece, what would you like our audience to know about the White Helmets and about James LeMonster? I can't pronounce his fucking name. I can't. So we're gonna go with James LeMonster.
It's a much better name anyway. Look, I think what people really need to know, and this, of course, is what the BBC is probably going to omit from its 10-week documentary audio program. The White Helmets was not established inside Syria. It was established in Turkey and Jordan. It is not recognized by the International Civil Defense Organization in Geneva. It's not recognized as a civil defense organization inside Syria. They only recognize the real Syria Civil Defense, which was established in Syria in 1953. So the White Helmets are a shadow state construct. End of argument. Mm-hmm. They're embedded exclusively with the terrorist groups, and they move with the terrorist groups. So in other words, the so-called humanitarian organization, when an area is liberated, it doesn't stay behind to take care of the civilians. It gets on the buses with the armed groups and it moves, in this case, in most cases, to Idlib, where it sets up camp with Al-Qaeda, and even Brett McGurk has described Idlib as the largest Al-Qaeda haven since 9/11. They are responsible, according to British government documentation, they are responsible for providing the evidence, as I said before, to corroborate UK foreign policy and UK criminalization of the Syrian government and the Russian forces. They are also responsible, in the same document, it states that they provide essential evidence to the likes of Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International. So they are the main feed of disinformation to the media, to the UN agencies, to the so-called human rights organizations that are all part of the non-governmental, which are governmental complex, which are working, of course, as I said, to demonize and criminalize the Syrian government. And of course, they are responsible for the staging of the chemical weapon events. And as such, in Douma, for example, they are potentially guilty of the murder of the children and the civilians that were used in that staging. I've actually visited the civilian prisons in Douma that were set up by Jaish al-Islam. Many of them were the victims from 2013, the invasion of an industrial city called Adra, which is, I'm just trying to remember, which is kind of northwest of Damascus. And the prisoners from that city, by the way, Jaish al-Islam and Nusra Front, committed terrible atrocities in the city. They, in one particular bakery, they burned a number of the workers and their family in the big furnaces that we used to make the bread. They were burned alive. Others were decapitated in the streets. The list is endless, but thousands were actually kidnapped and brought to Duma. And there they were held in the underground prisons in Tauber prison, which I visited, which were absolutely hideous. And I actually spoke to one woman who'd been incarcerated there in solitary confinement for around, I think it was 5 years. And she told me they actually carried out chemical experiments on some of the prisoners. Like they would inject them with drugs that would knock them out for 2 days or 48 hours, and then they would see if they would come around. They would spray them with certain chemicals and see what effect it would have on their skin. This is the testimony that she gave me after the liberation of Duma. And so, you know, it's not, and let's remember that the British government, I mean, I know I've digressed a bit, but it's still connected to the White Helmets, because effectively the White Helmets were working in collaboration with Jaish al-Islam and all the other extremist groups. But if we focus on Jaish al-Islam, and if we remember that it was James Le Mesurier who established the White Helmets when he was working for Analysis, Research and Knowledge Group, ARC Group, in 2013. Now in 2013, his second wife was working with him at ARC. What the BBC program has thrown into the mix for me, which is, you know, what I'm grateful to the BBC for, because now they're going to actually bring some of the spooks out of the shadows for me to actually identify them. One guy, Harry Wynne Williams, that was identified by Chloe Hadjimathieu, the producer, he was with Bell Pottinger in 2006 when he was reporting on the potential of democratizing Syria and the region, etc., to the British government. And of course, Bell Pottinger was given 500 million by the Pentagon to be embedded with American troops in Iraq to produce propaganda and destabilizing propaganda as part of the neo-colonialist project in Iraq. So I know this is really complex for people, but it's important to make these connections, because James Le Mesurier's third wife, Emma Winberg, was a co-founder of a company called Incostrat that was effectively funded by the British government through the same fund as they funneled money to the White Helmets, to produce the media and PR for, among other groups, Jaish al-Islam. Which was the group that had already tortured, decapitated, executed, crucified, etc., civilians living under their occupation. And through the interviews that I did with people, with medical staff, etc., in Duma immediately after the chemical attack, it became clear that the White Helmets had effectively staged the event. That they had created the panic by shouting chemical attack when it wasn't a chemical attack. It was a simple case of wartime asphyxiation, you know, the, shells coming in and the soot and the dust, etc., and people not being able to breathe. That's basically what it was. That's how the medics and the nurses and so on duty that night described it. They said there was no chemical attack. This was just an absolutely standard night for us, people coming in, having inhaled dust, etc. So the White Helmets effectively have worked as the propaganda merchants, both for the governments in the West, as I said, the UN agencies and the human rights organizations, but also as a kind of whitewashing agent for the armed groups, because they provide the humanitarian pretext for those armed groups' existence, if you like, right? And if you actually track the conflict areas, as I've done, you will see that as Nusra Front take up a new position, as they take up a new front line, you will always find the White Helmets right there, right? When those areas are liberated, you will find the White Helmet centers either shared with Nusra Front, or you will find the Nusra Front Center in a complex above ground and the White Helmets underground, but under the Nusra Front Center. In Aleppo, for example, we spoke to civilians there who told us that Nusra Front and the White Helmets not only shared the complex, but they would bring prisoners there for torture, for detainment, for execution, etc. You know, I mean, this group is and another very important point to make, the real Syria Civil Defense is an inclusive organization. In other words, if you visit any of their units, they will comprise Syrian Christians, Syrian Shia Muslims, Syrian Druze, Syrian, every single possible ethnic minority will be involved in each center. If you look at the white helmets, they are exclusively extremist Muslim, right? They do not comprise of any Christians, of any Shia. In fact, they've called publicly for the extermination of Shia civilians in Idlib. They've put things out on Twitter. They've held banners up calling for the burning and the extermination of Kafrai and Fua, which were two villages in Idlib inhabited by predominantly Shia Muslim that were besieged and shelled on a daily basis by Nusra Front and Ara al-Sham. So, you know, this group, I mean, I could talk all night about the crimes they've committed, about what they stand accused of by Syrian civilians. But effectively, it's a shadow state construct, an intelligence construct created predominantly by the British, funded also by America, by Qatar. And Qatar, of course, is funding Al-Qaeda in Syria, funded by Germany, equipment provided by Holland, by Germany, by the Netherlands, etc., etc. So, you know, this is a vast intelligence project.
Could you talk a little bit about the organ harvesting and organ trafficking?
Yeah. Basically, I would recommend everyone read the work by Maxim Grigoriev of, the Foundation for the Study of Democracy. He did the most intensive investigation into the organ trafficking, and it's available on the web. I have the PDF. I can send it to you, Steve, if you want it. You can. So it's available on your
Please
website.
do.
Yeah. But basically, in order to understand the organ trafficking, I think we have to go back to 1999 and to Kosovo, Pristina in particular, when Bernard Kouchner was the representative of the UN, and James Le Mesurier, who at that time was a British intelligence officer, was tasked with the transformation of the Kosovo Liberation Army, which was predominantly Albanian warlords and Al-Qaeda, into the Kosovo Protection Corps or Security Corps. So effectively, he was doing the same thing as he's done in Syria, but kind of flip it around. Okay, so he was taking an Al-Qaeda outfit and he was transforming them into something friendly and cuddly, and trying to distance them from their terrorist roots and their warlord roots. And at the same time as he was tasked with this, and at the same time as Bernard Kouchner was the UN representative in Kosovo, the KLA was effectively running cross-border organ trafficking and child trafficking operations, and taking predominantly Serbs to have their organs removed, some of them while they were still alive, of course. Carla Del Ponte has written, and I can't remember the name of it right now, but she's written the book extensively, documented. Of course, she met with huge obstacles from the UN, from Bernard Kouchner, from all of the, imperialist guard, let's say, against this investigation. So fast forward, and you have James Le Mesurier, again, manufacturing the white helmets. Now, in any war zone, there are two major harvests. One is organ trafficking, and the second is child trafficking. Now, you've only got to look at Operation Baby Lift from the Vietnam War, when thousands of babies were literally airlifted on huge, great Pan Am carriers. If you go on the web and look at the photos, it's shocking. Literally Airbuses full of babies that were illegally taken from their mothers and brought to the US for adoption. So the inter-country adoption, which is effectively legalized trafficking, I've just written an article for Unlimited Hangout talking about that, regarding another organization which has also been set up by the UK called the Violets, that work hand in glove with the White Helmets. So you have child abduction, which is legalized trafficking. You have child and human trafficking, of course. and you have organ trafficking. And effectively what Syrian civilians have accused the White Helmets of is the theft of lightly injured children, the taking of these children to the borders with Turkey, and they're being brought back with their organs missing. Very similar to, of course, what you see with Palestinian children in the occupied territories. I have reports there, unverified, that Israel is involved in these operations. I say they're unverified, but the source is they are there, and they've actually witnessed the Israeli doctors turning up on the border. ISIS, of course, has been accused of running child trafficking, human trafficking, and organ trafficking operations. And we know, of course, that ISIS is another proxy of the United States, in particular in the UK.
We've got Hillary Clinton admitting that shit.
Yeah, well, and
Like,
John Kerry also.
Yeah.
The same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I think you have to, the BBC has basically dismissed this investigation out of hand. It just doesn't happen. It just never happened. But in any war situation, the red market, as it's called, organ trafficking, and it's not only, people tend to think it's only internal organs. No, it's your hair, it's your bone marrow, it's your skin, it's your eyes, it's every single part of a human body can be recycled, basically, and sold for huge profit. And so if you imagine in a war situation, these armed groups, like sometimes the funding stream is being cut off. So what do? They form mafia gangs. And what do they start to do? They start to tax people, they start to take over houses, etc. And then gradually they start to see that organ trafficking, human trafficking is lucrative. So guess what? They start creating rings that are running these operations. And according to Syrian civilians, the White Helmets are pivotal to this, because of course they have the cover to be able to drive, for example, from Aleppo to the Turkish border. I mean, when there was the Rashdin massacre in April 2017 to the south of Aleppo, when the buses of civilians were attacked by the terrorists in a kind of suicide trip, and hundreds of children were injured and killed. Those children's bodies, both dead and dying and injured, were piled one on top of the other. The video footage is there by the White Helmets into trucks that were clearly marked with Nusra Front banners, and they were taken from there. They weren't taken to the hospital in Aleppo, they were taken to close to the Turkish border. And a large number, I think at least 60 of those kids are still missing. They haven't been returned. So, you have to start thinking the worst at this case. Children's organs have the highest value for obvious reasons. Not a nice subject. Not a nice subject.
I want to make sure that we get to bring in Alison Mason from London or thereabouts for this. But real quick, as we're doing that, you mentioned, Vanessa, when we were talking earlier this week, that the BBC4 is going after everyone, like, who is remotely spoken outside the narrative, and this includes former Ambassador Peter Ford. And Peter Ford is one of those people who basically flat out predicted false flag season in Syria. And I was wondering if you could speak to that quickly. And then, Alison, I promise we'll get to you. I'm sorry. You've been waiting very patiently, and I'm sorry.
Hi, Alison.
Oh, I'm sorry, Alison. Yeah, I mean, I'm in regular contact with Peter. I mean, basically, the BBC team have targeted the academic working group on Syria media and propaganda, who've exposed a huge amount of the propaganda operations, intelligence operations inside Syria. Peter Ford, former ambassador, I think he was there 2003 to 2006. Of course, he blew apart the Amnesty International, Sadnaya prison report. just basically dismissed it out of hand. I mean, as someone that's actually visited the prison, I mean, he just completely like wiped the floor with Amnesty International. But then actually they had to backpedal fairly rapidly because their entire report was based on some kind of virtual reality cartoon drawing in London, I think it was. So yeah, they've written to Peter Ford. He's written a suitably scathing reply, of course. I mean, one interesting thing, I was speaking with James Corbett the other day, I think yesterday, I'm losing track. And he actually said, yeah, but he said they haven't contacted, for example, John Pilger, who was, you know, put out about 2 years ago that they're nothing more than a propaganda construct embedded with Nusra Front. Stephen Kinzer, of course, is also out of them. Philip Giraldi, Ray McGovern, Gareth Porter. I mean, the list is endless, actually, of people who, you know, Robert Parry, God bless him, when he was alive. He, you know, he dismissed them as an intelligence construct. So, I'm not alone in this. That's the extraordinary thing. You know, they keep targeting the same people, but we're not alone. And the majority of people on social media know perfectly well what the white helmets are. So to some extent, I just think, I'm hoping this is a real suicide mission by the BBC, to be honest.
Oh yeah. Well, that was, I mean, that was our hope too when I got the message Monday morning from Whitney that's like, we need to talk, do you have a minute? You know, like, I'll make a minute, you know, fuck. And then we had that conversation, and I feel like I used all of my breaks at work to get a hold of other people that are friends of mine that have shows and that, you know, might be able to get the word out about that. I even called people I don't like, you know. And got to see you on one of those shows yesterday. It was great.
Hey, dude,
I really hope that like there's a feeling on your part and on Eva's part that you know that it's not just, you know, you against the BBC, that there's a massive community of people out here that will you know, go to bat for you and raise hell over this, because again, what you're essentially being accused of is talking to the people who live in the area where this is happening, and that is on its face so fucking cartoonish that like something's got to be done about that.
Damn you, you did a journalism.
Right? How dare you do a journalism?
Yeah, and I did a journalism not with Al Qaeda.
You're supposed to be embedded with the terrorist groups. How else are we going to get the fucking word out? Oh.
Cartoon. Fucking cartoon.
How are you doing, Allie? It's good to see you.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm really well.
Hello.
Just stepped in off the streets of London.
I see.
Feel like a Jerry Baker song.
I see you've got the Pompeo sign behind you. I love it.
Oh, the giant blob of satanic jello for Mike Pompeo. My God, I love that. By the way, if you're watching right now and you have no idea what that sign is about, I did an interview with Whitney Webb a couple of months ago where she referred to Mike Pompeo as a giant blob of satanic jello.
I thought that was
and that's
Kissinger.
now the title of that episode.
I thought it was Kissinger.
So please go check that out. I mean, not now, because, you know, obviously we're in the middle of the show.
No. I have got a Mike Pompeo story, though, I can tell you, because we, of course, wanted to greet him 2 times recently when he came to London. So one time we bird dogged him at the policy exchange unit, and he didn't know we were going to be there. So it was a surprise attack. There was only 6 of us with our signs, but Mike got a bit afraid, and he had to hide in there for a long, long time. And he got his motorbike entourage and the big black Range Rovers and the limos and that. Then you could see them poking their heads out the windows going, they're still there. What are we going to do? How do we get Mike out? So they took their little entourage around the corner to try to divert us. And we said, no. We went around the corner and we go, nah, this is a plan. You know, this is a ruse. So we ran back around the other side and then just waited until Mike had to come out. And that was fun because we just shouted at the top of our heads, you know, war criminal, you know, CIA scum. We also shouted CIA scum into the press van that he carried. You know, he's got a press van. They come over from Waurika and you know, they've got all the earpieces. Obviously, you know, they're embedded with Mike Pompeo. So they deserved it and they got it too. That was episode number 1 of Mike Pompeo.
Well, I mean, the point has been raised before that at what point do we start attributing war criminal or war criminal adjacent to the people in the media who have been carrying 100% of the water for these bullshit wars of aggression and sold us a stack of bodies built on lies?
Yeah,
and I kind of want everybody to field that one too. Like, is there, you know, a legitimacy in attributing that label to people in the media who have sold us this shit?
I always hashtag John Howard, who was the one that got us into the illegal war. Yeah, he was the Prime Minister of Australia then. So every time I say John Howard, I say hashtag war criminal John Howard.
Fuck.
So you need to hashtag war criminal on everyone. That's a war criminal.
Hey,
I
Steve,
definitely think that the media
do
has
you remember how to
a huge
deactivate
responsibility.
Oh, he's coming back. Hold on.
Oh, sorry. And should be held liable. I mean, we've just heard today about people who, I mean, they're knowingly lying. They've seen things with their own eyes and are knowingly lying. And I do think that that's a big deal. I mean, that's, to me personally, I feel like that's even, well, this is a weird statement, but it's almost disgusts me more than the war criminals. You know what I mean? Because they're just doing their bidding. You know, they don't have to. It's just, ugh. So that's my take, Steve.
I see it as our job. When we go out, we actually do it. I mean, episode 2 of Mike Pompeo, he came recently, a couple of months ago. And because we'd ambushed him the first time, he made the police take us to the other side of the road, which was Downing Street, okay? So it was quite a long distance. But they allowed me to keep this sign on the driveway. As his car drove in, that's what he saw on the way in. And then when they were having the party drinks, they were doing at the back of it, we went round the side and with our megaphones and PA systems, that's what we were shouting again. You're in there with Mike Pompeo. Mike Pompeo, I lied, I cheated, I stole, you know. And on that particular day, we were also there in support of Harry Dunn's family, who went to take it to him as well. So we did a lot of shouting for them as well, you know, covering up for Anne Tsoukalos, the CIA agent that ran down wrong side of the road, ran down their son, Harry Dunn, a 19-year-old boy, and yeah, up north here. So he deserves it. He knows it's coming.
He's going to
get it every time.
So I wanted to ask, because in London, there's been growing support over the last years for Julian. The in-person gatherings that they have recently started to get interrupted. So could you talk about that and what's happened going forward from there?
Was that the police interruption you're talking about, Andrew?
Yeah.
Okay. 2 weeks ago, we had a surprise visit from police officers. There were about 50 police men and women, and it was unexpected because every time we go to this particular protest site, which is the Eros sculpture at a place called Piccadilly Circus, it's a nice sort of traffic island of its own with a lot of steps, and a lot of people gather around there. So we've been doing it under the Eros sculpture for 4 months, over 4 months, and never had any trouble with police, except they did bring the media unit, and you know, a few of them are filming us sometimes, so we knew, you know, we were being monitored, but they never spoke to us. Yeah, they'd occasionally ask, who's your leader and when are you going to go, that kind of thing they always ask. But this time they just came and basically, because there were 50 of them, they individually went up to everybody and said, because of the new COVID laws, you're in an illegal protest, and if you don't go home now, you'll be arrested. So that was, pretty heavy because, everyone was being pursued individually by their own cop kind of thing. And of course we just sort of kept mobile then. We just walk away from that man or lady when they're talking to us, and so they don't get their whole message out, and just walking around with our signs, just revolving, moving around. And I was rudely interrupted when I was doing a speech on the megaphone, so I said, could you please not interrupt me while I'm making a speech? Thank you, not. And anyway, they arrested one of us who refused to go, and that was it. But the whole night was quite bizarre because there were so many police around. We went round to the Charing Cross police station to get our activist out, but they held us up at the door. They wouldn't let us in. They wouldn't give us any information. And I tweeted. I took one nice policeman actually at the police station came up to me. I had my trolley full of signs because I'm like trolley lady there. I'm bringing all this stuff with me, PAs and stuff on this trolley. So I propped up the sign that said, the crushing of Assange is the start of the surveillance state. And I had it on the back, propped up high so that I could see the Charing Cross police station sign and doorway in the background. And I asked him to assist me because I was just going to take this photo. Before I know you're going to tell me to go home, but I'm just going to could you just hold that? And I'm going to take this photo. So I took the photo. He was really nice. He said, it's all cool, all good in the hood. And then I walked around the corner, literally 50 meters around the corner on my way home. And 15, I stopped to tweet the photo. 15 police came up to me to move me on again. And I was like, is it illegal to tweet on the street now? Like all these people in a local bar are just like watching going, what the hell is happening there? And I was just shouting, this is a fascist police state. Why 15 police stop me from tweeting? Oh, that was pretty heavy.
You gotta give him the Kevin Pollak from Usual Suspects in that one, and just look at him and be like, "Are you sure you brought enough guys?"
Yeah, I should have done
sure.
that. 15, quite
one of me.
Yeah.
One of my favorite accusations leveled against Vanessa and Eva by Chloe, what's her name there, from the BBC is that it's an unpronounceable name to me, and I'm gonna murder it. And I understand, like, I have a fucking silly last name, I do, and it's I don't expect anyone to ever get it right. I was incredibly impressed and grateful, Vanessa, when you were on Last American Vagabond earlier this week. It's like, holy shit, you got that right. That's awesome. But one of the accusations leveled against you and Eva is that you're activists. And like that's somehow
the humanity
a dirty word, and that somehow activism and journalism don't have the ability to share space. And in my mind, to me, it's like, well, fuck, if you guys were doing your job, I wouldn't have to be an activist, because this would be handled already. And I was wondering what your thoughts were about that particular accusation.
Well, I think the other great one was that I believe Britain is behind everything that's wrong in the world, basically.
Right. Well,
I mean,
pretty much for about 500 years plus, yeah. Yeah, I mean, this is insane. It's like the whole denigration. You're not a journalist because you didn't go to the right schools and you don't have the piece of paper that says that you can be employed by the BBC. In other words, you're just a useful idiot. This whole, it's all about this kind of weird creed of objectivity, is that journalists are supposed to be this kind of completely put everything in the right frame. Everything, it should be objective, neutral. You should show both sides. Bullshit. Like, as a journalist, do you remember John Pilcher during the Vietnam War? The bombing of Marshall Islands? Did he show objectivity? Did he explain the reasons why they might have bombed? No. The point of a journalist is to have an opinion and to evidence that opinion and to provide research to back up that opinion, right? And to put your opinion out there. Your opinion is based on what you see, not what, you know, you're doing in some office in Washington or London or Tel Aviv or Beirut. Because there they never see anything that's actually happening on the ground. They're just talking to probably Al-Qaeda or Jaish al-Islam or one of the terrorist groups, and they're telling them, yeah, of course, you know, the Syrian army came and bombed us and they did this and they just write that verbatim, right? So this whole thing of why can't you be an activist and a journalist, provided you're honest about whatever bias you might have. Like, I'm biased against imperialism. I'm biased against bullies. I'm biased against anyone that tries to persecute someone that hasn't got a voice, right? And I'm perfectly clear and I'm perfectly honest about that bias. So
you wouldn't get through the MI5. You wouldn't get through the MI5 vetting though at the BBC, though, would you? Okay? Yeah, they haven't got an office there anymore, but you know, like they used to. But you know, you'd never get through anyway. I think they just do it remotely now, don't they?
Probably. It's probably an online application, isn't it?
Online, yeah. Straight to GCHQ with that one. Yeah.
Can you be a shill?
So, Ali, talk a little bit about what's happened since that police disruption and the arrest of the activist. Like, has there been growing support? Has the on the ground actions continued?
They've all continued, and the support hasn't wavered, and actually has been growing. And also, public, the public spectacle. The people that are watching us in the public are actually more interested and seem more activated. So I think it's actually given us more energy. We've got a really good vibe. We've got more drums now. So we're doing a bit of an XR drumming thing, but not totally. But, you know, it helps to have, you know, a bit of rhythm going for our chants and stuff. It hasn't put people off at all. The rules that they have pertain to, like, we've still got a right to protest. And those police were giving the wrong information. But under the rules now, the COVID rules, people who protest must apply and have a risk assessment done and submit a risk assessment for every protest. So,
what?
Yeah.
You're gonna have to walk me through that one.
We've got a guy who's a professional risk assessment man, so I didn't have to actually do the risk assessments this time. But it just means, you know,
priceless for that, by the way.
Hey, what's that?
Kendra was making a very priceless face at that. Just the.
It's you know, what are the risks? Someone might fall over a sign. You know, that you've just got to lay out the risks, okay? Oh, and they also require you to have a first aid kit on hand, and to have a thing of hand sanitizer, yeah, for everybody to use. But when they've come the police haven't actually touched us since that day, that one day. And it was a really bad move. It's a bit like the BBC, you know, giving Vanessa and Eva a hard time. Okay, that's just brought so much bad publicity for them. It was kind of, and likewise, the police putting attention onto us as Julian Assange supporters is actually what they don't want. So there was a bit of a wrong-footed move by them because, you know, obviously they try to keep Assange out of the media, out of the, you know, public light. So it just drew more attention. We got more supporters. We got the public, you know, starting to come in and chant with us and stuff like that. So, yeah, it didn't really affect us too badly. It was a bit of a, you know, sort of a funny night that night, but, yeah, we got over it.
I can only imagine. I mean, anybody who was there witnessing it, you know, just seeing the pictures and things and some of the videos on Twitter, you know, it was just so ridiculous, the number of them that were there, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, it
was pretty freaky. They just bring big vans, you know, like van loads and van loads and van. You just see all these vans turning up and you go, what the hell is going to happen now, kind of thing. But the guy who got arrested was a very interesting man, and he had a lot of experience at being arrested because he's a man that walked around the world without a passport to show that there shouldn't be any borders in the 1970s, okay, when he was at uni. And so he you know, an old hand to get arrested and set back on planes and stuff like that. So, you know, he just took it in his stride, really. We had another arrested. a couple of weeks before we had another arrest at a local bus stop. So it was Boris Johnson's bus stop at Downing Street. So it's the most heavily surveilled bus stop in the whole world. And as soon as this little activist went there and used her spray can of glue to put up a Julian Assange poster, the cops were there just like, whoo, they're there in an instant. And they arrested her, held her for 8 hours. And the crew went down later. They had made a very funny film clip of them cleaning the bus shelter, Boris Johnson's bus shelter outside Downing Street, with all sorts of sprays and things that you can get from the supermarket and scrubbing brushes and stuff. And they were singing funny songs while they were doing it. And of course, being the most heavily surveilled bus stop in the world, the police could see them cleaning the bus shelter as well. So they knew that there was no harm done, and they were, that she was being held really, uselessly. Well, they weren't going to be able to bring the charge, so they let it go. But she was 8 hours in there,
Can I just ask you a question? Because I attended quite a few of the protests in France of the Gilets jaunes, the yellow vests. And the police, I don't even know how to describe it. The police were almost robotic in their violence and in the suppression of the crowds. I mean, it was actually, I've kind of, I've seen quite a lot in Syria, but that actually scared me more than anything, was just this blind violence, and there was no consideration for kids, no consideration for elderly, no consideration for people that were getting sick from the gas and so on. Are you seeing anything like that kind of level in the UK, or has it not kind of reached that level yet?
There have been some, not at our protests, there have been some incidents where they've arrested people very violently. The lockdown protests is one case in point. There's a lady called Kate, and I can't remember her last name now, but she was, Mulvaney, she was thrown to the ground. I mean, she was wearing a pair of stilettos and a dress, like she wasn't like dressed as an activist, would wear, like jeans and boots or something. And they just just basically really rough handled her, and she fell to the ground. But they haven't done that. The only thing I've noticed is a subtle difference in their sort of attitude. So generally speaking, they don't know what the law is, the police here. They have no idea, because I mean, they've done all these COVID laws, and they're just like, a nightmare for anyone to really, sort of try to, interpret. But so they don't know the law, and you can actually sort of, by asking them questions like, what is the law and things like that, they actually don't know the answer to it. So it's very hard if you can sort of back foot them to, it's hard to arrest someone if you don't know what you're arresting them for or what the law is, So now they've started bringing little notebooks with it written down on the laws, the little act, but yeah, but they get it out of, it's hang on, I've got it here.
Every police officer is walking around with their billy club and teeny notebook and silly hat, like, hold on, sir, hold on. And he's flipping through the book trying to figure out what the hell you did.
It's a bit like that. And now,
my confidence, though, that the British Bobby is still like a little bit the British Bobby. It hasn't quite become the Israeli task force yet.
Not quite. No. They wear masks now. So at the beginning, when there was lockdown and it was very important to wear masks, the police never used to wear masks, but they'd come up to you. So I remember a case management hearing outside at Westminster Court for Julian, when they were saying to us, wear masks, where's your mask and stuff like that. But they weren't wearing masks themselves. So you just say, well, where's yours? What are you doing? And they'd say, oh, they didn't provide us with masks. But now they've got masks, the ones that, really protect you. They gape at the side and would protect you from any spray or, anything,
So one of the things I would recommend for masks, and it's something that we did when we were in DC for our CNN protest, like our march from the multiple buildings, like media outlets. Get black bags instead of masks, like the Gitmo bags, and get them for everyone, because you can make them for about $1 a piece with thin black fabric and fabric glue. So when an officer asks you to put a mask on, you just put a black bag over your head. And then at that point, they really just retract. Like there's not much conversation left.
We got it crazy.
I actually had a man on the bus on the way back ask me, where's my mask? And he was wearing a mask, but he was also having a rum and coke while he was on the bus. And I was thinking, where the fuck do you get off asking me to wear a mask? You're half pissed, Anyway, I don't know why I said it to him, but I said, listen, mister, you're turning into a bit of a Nazi, aren't you? This is what they, it's not your job to go around asking people about masks. And I was shouting out like an old lady on the bus does, sort of thing, and everyone's sort of turning around in their mask going, and I said, it's not your job. And haven't you read the signs? Disabilities can be hidden, and you shouldn't put people on the spot like that, and so I'm just shouting this out in the bus, and he's like, look, you're making people move their seats. And I said, yeah, well, that's what Nazis do. They make people run away, don't they? So people need to really wise up. But I mean, we went to another demonstration. Have you spoken tonight about the new law in the UK that was passed with the assent of Keir Starmer? The spy cops,
the
killer
covert
cops.
human
The right
intelligence
to
bill.
kill act, essentially. No, we haven't talked about that yet.
Oh, you haven't? No. So we went to a little protest on Thursday night for that outside on Parliament Green. And Piers Corbyn, Jeremy Corbyn's brother, was there, and he was sort of, making a speech about it. That's just horrendous. Everyone's just in shock here, that Keir Starmer told his Labour colleagues to abstain and then vote. Then they voted for it, and seven of them lost the whip or something because they voted against it. But he ended up voting for it. So that is really super scary, especially because they have had inquiries going on here, about the spies who did invade environmental protest groups and had relationships with police officers and children born, and were really persecuted. And
hang on, is this the MI5 bill that they're allowed to commit crimes to as part of their investigation, etc.? Yeah. So it's that John Pilger actually put out, isn't it? And then the Overseas Operations Bill, which allows soldiers to commit war crimes also as part of their operations. So yeah, it's part of this entire kind of lawlessness that's coming, which of course is only going to benefit the ruling classes. It's not going to benefit the poor people, the working class.
I kind of feel like the overall intentional media silence on what's been happening to Julian Assange is what is allowing this more just fascistic legislation to be able to take place. And Kathy Bogan is in my chat here, Vanessa, and she was wondering if you had if you're looking for help with legal aid on this. Do you think it's actually going to come to a court situation? Because she basically threatened you with the potential of arrest in that email that she sent, and is like it. I know what your response to me was, but I don't know if you want to expand on that any here for the folks at home who are watching.
I mean, thank God I'm based in Syria, and they're fairly unlikely to extradite me because I'm so in with the Syrian ministers, according to Chloe Hatton. But I think, again, it was Sharmeen Nawani that tweeted out that they're very unlikely to take me to court. Although then, when you consider the Julian Assange case, there's no justice involved in that case, Mm-hmm. But they're unlikely to allow it to get to a real court, not just a magistrate's court, to any kind of real international law court. Why? Because as state media, one assumes that my legal team would have access to state documents. And considering the latest document leak from the Foreign Office, which of course they're accusing Russia of having hacked their website to get hold of the documents, there's an awful lot of information that is very damning to the British government, and which would vindicate, mine and Eva's and many others' view of the Syrian conflict.
Are-
And I would be allowed to bring witnesses, and I would be allowed to produce evidence, which of course the BBC is not allowing me to do. And I really want to make the point, yeah, you know, Chloe contacted me back in June, but I don't know if I sent you the whole transcript of all our conversations, which are very weird. I mean, she started off with all this completely inaccurate stuff, like I worked for RT, that I can't even remember it all, but she got so many things wrong in her opening paragraph that it didn't instill confidence. She then tried to take it off in weird sort of, I want to talk to you about your father and his role in what you're doing and your time in Gaza. And I'm thinking, you've told me I will have total 5 minutes in your White Helmet program, but you want to talk to me about my father, about Gaza, and it was just bizarre, to be honest. And it went on for a few weeks, actually for a few months, kind of on and off. And she even said to me, yeah, we'll give you the whole transcript, because I said, well, okay, how do I know you're not going to edit what I say to you right out of the program or twist it or distort it? I mean, not like the BBC doesn't do that, right? And so she promised, she spoke to her producers or her grown-up producers, and they kind of said, yeah, you know, she can have the whole transcript. In the end, I had such a shitty feeling from my conversations. I just thought, this is way too familiar. She's being way too kind of nice about everything, too kind of chatty, you know. This is just another smear. This is just a trap somehow. And then Peter Ford, he told me, he said, no, I'm going to do it. He ended up putting the phone down on her. And he then messaged me and said, you were so right not to do the interview. He was vile. I mean, he just lost his temper. And I mean,
and that's a diplomat losing his temper. Yeah. That's a professional diplomat being like, no, this bitch is too out of hand. I can't.
You know, so basically, and then, you know, Paul McKeague, he's published the conversations he's had with her. Other members of the working group had their run-in with her, you know, so it was all very weird. So the only thing I can say is, no, I refuse to do the program, because however I might have phrased my responses to her questions, I believe it would have been distorted. It would have been inserted at moments where, for example, she had someone that she's giving way more airtime to who can condemn what I've said, etc. So I think it would have, whatever I said, it would have been manipulated and used against me.
Yeah, I made the mistake of cracking a few jokes with a Daily Beast reporter, and those got printed as like, this is what this guy thinks, you know, fucking, never again will I have a sense of humor with anyone in establishment media.
Oh, no, don't.
No, you have to have a deeper sense of humor. You have to do Commander X style and convince the media outlet that someone made an action figure of you and go a step beyond. So that way, when they carry the ridiculousness, it's them that has to issue an apology for how ridiculous you made them perform. That's the trick there.
He smokes cigarettes. Like they'll just grasp at straws, anything they can.
Oh yeah.
One positive thing from Australia is, did you speak about Dan Oakes as not being prosecuted by the Australian Federal Police? They've withdrawn the charges against him.
No,
they're not going to proceed. Yeah. And so it's just David McBride now.
So yeah, we haven't talked to David I haven't talked to David in about a week and a half. I've
talked to he's on our Discord. He mentioned it in there, and I talked to him a little bit.
Okay.
Just to shout it out real quick. There's in the description for YouTube, our call to action. One of them is actually sending an email to every single member of the Australian Parliament in support of David McBride. So just to put that out there as you go on with this.
I mean, the reason why they're not pursuing it.
Nope, go ahead. What were you going to say, Allison?
It's a public defense. You know, there's no public interest in them pursuing the case with, you know, but obviously they don't want their war crimes revealed in court. This is why I said it, because, you know, what Vanessa said about, you know, they won't sue because they won't take it to court because they don't want their war crimes exposed. And that's exactly what happened in Julian's hearing. I mean, when Khaled al-Masri was about to give his evidence, his testimony, they had a mysterious problem with their audio video link, you know, and so it was only submitted as a written testimony, so it wasn't said in court as such.
Damn it, Trevor.
So, you know, that's fine.
Which is even more of an injustice, because he has still not been able to, you know, that would have been not exactly, but in some way, you know, to be able to confront the US, you know, in some way he could have given evidence against them in that, and I hate that that was taken away.
Well, I do too, but his testimony is on the public record. It is,
yeah.
you know, it still stands there, and that's what our job is now. So what we do in our actions now is when we go out is we read Khaled al-Masri's testimony out to the public. Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
They put a hood over my head. They sodomized me. That was the first thing they did. Yeah. Then they tortured me. Then they rendered me to Afghanistan. They put me in a cold prison cell where it was winter, and they repeatedly tortured me. And months after they found out that they had the wrong guy, I was still there in that jail. And, you know, they failed to release me into the military because the Red Cross would have been, you know, through the Red Cross, because they would have let me go straight away. But yeah, he was held for another month. So this is our job now. That's what we do. We just go out and the testimony that was presented in evidence, we're continually doing speeches on the street and telling people what it's about. And it's people just stop and go, what the actual, yeah? When they hear this is what the CIA have done to this man, you know?
But when
you got people crying.
When we were listening to that live, that was rough. Like, just reading, that was the roughest fucking day. That and the medical testimony that broke us.
Yeah,
it was awful.
Yeah,
yeah.
You got members of the public crying when they get to it. They hear it. You can see people crying.
Kathy Vogan again. Mark Summers QC summarized al-Masri's statement, and she says, "I think it's the only time that I saw Baretzer emote." And how could you not, like, if you have even a shred of humanity left, how can you not be overwhelmingly impacted by that testimony? I mean, covering it was really fucking rough, and covering the medical days. Like, I fucking broke down on the way to work, like 3 days in a row. I had to pull my truck over and fucking have him in it, you know? And again, like, that's just me having to talk about it, let alone having it done to you, or having like the most deeply intimate parts of your psyche laid bare before a courtroom like that. You know, I can't imagine it. I can't. I'm incapable of imagining that. You know.
Well,
Good.
Yeah, as Kendra said, that, you know, it was very galling when he couldn't actually give it verbally, because imagine how you would feel after so many years, no one acknowledging, until he got to the European Court of Human Rights, and they found that the Macedonian police were culpable in his torture, and but there was no apology from the CIA. He has not received any compensation from them or the American government. You know, to sit there for that many years, knowing that this has happened to you, but everyone's thinking that you're just crazy and you just somehow disappeared yourself, you know, and then turned up again and say, you know, telling people that, you know, you were tortured and sodomized and you know, and taken to Afghanistan for, you know, 4 months, and then dropped in an Albanian forest in the middle of the you know, the night, and made to turn away from the people who dropped you off, turn your back to them and walk down the road, thinking that you were going to get shot in the back, and then finally making your way back to your home in Germany, and to find that nobody was there because they didn't know what happened to you, so they went back to Lebanon, you know. And when he rang his wife left a phone number, and Khaled rang his wife, she couldn't speak on the phone. He had to put her mother on the phone so he could, his wife just couldn't speak. It's just the most devastating account one of the most devastating accounts that I've ever seen. And all power to you, I couldn't go into the court. Not that I would have been able, I probably would have been able to go in on one of the days because we were there early enough all of the time, but we were fielding those few seats to people who were going to report or people who had special interests. But I also find it very difficult to go into any of the court hearings for Julian because it makes me it'd make me so angry and upset that I just can't handle it. It's hard enough reading about it. That's how I feel about it.
I really liked what you said though about Khaled's statement, that's our job now. And I think that's so true. That's fine. You try to censor it there, it's not going to happen. It's in record, and now it's going to be screamed through a bullhorn all around, and I think that's
everywhere. You can get it. You can download that. You can we're actually making a little series of recordings where we're getting famous people to read out the defense witness testimony. And we're just going to do a little suite of recordings that we can put out, as well, and play at events and stuff. Ed Asner is one of the people. Does anyone know Ed Asner? He was on an American show. He was was he editor of a newspaper on a show or something?
Oh, I gotta look it up.
Steve.
I know the name.
You guys are too young. I do remember him as a little guy with a bald head, and then he had hair on the sides.
I'm muted. Yeah, I know who Ed Asner is. I'm old enough for that. Unfortunately.
He's a comedian too, right? And actor. Yeah. Okay.
Oh, yeah. And the guy from the Fine Young Cannibals is going to do one, and there's a whole lot of people that are going to do them for us.
That dude is weird as fuck, man. I want to hang out with that guy. I
Which
do.
guy?
The guy from Fine Young Cannibals.
Yeah, Roland. Yeah.
I'm sure Ed Asner's a weird dude too, but he didn't make She Drives Me Crazy. That video was just wild, man. Wild. I want in on that. I do. Everyone just had a tiny little bit of insight into the way that my mind works. I'm sure people will be backing slowly away from the fucking YouTube at this point.
It's a great song though, isn't it? He's got a great voice.
Vanessa, I don't know how much time you have. If you need to go at any point, just give us a heads up. You have been with us for 2 hours, and it's been tremendous. And I definitely would like to catch up with you again on Slow News Days soon, just to kind of get an idea of how this is developing. Do you know when they're going to air that show?
I think from memory, it's going to be the beginning of November. She gave me until Monday to get back to her with my response to her charge sheet. And yeah, I probably will put in a response. Not the one that she's looking for, of course. I'm not going to do that myself, funnily enough. So yeah, I think it's early November. So I would guess in another, what are we now? 10 days.
Yeah.
If I ever find myself in a situation like that, I think my formal response is going to be the paperwork for a defamation lawsuit.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I remember when Mike Wendley of BBC Trending, I think it was, he basically after the Doomer attack, he did a smear piece on me and someone else on Twitter. Sarah Al Abdullah, who is like a Twitter activist, right? And he basically just picked the two of us randomly, and he sent me very similar questions to the ones Chloe had sent me. And he then went ahead with his entire smear piece. He did include a couple of my statements, I think, but of course, I mean, since then he's blocked me and gone protected tweets type person, because of course we're all vindicated now on the Duma chemical attack, right? So having gone through this whole, she's nothing but an obscure blogger, conspiracy theorist, Russian agent, Syrian agent, neo-Nazi, fascist, whatever, anti-Semitic, everything else. of course, what I was saying is completely vindicated. But as part of my statement, I did very clearly, and I've said the same thing very clearly to Chloe, if the BBC in any way infers that I'm funded by any government that has an interest in the Syrian conflict, I will be taking legal action. If there is any content in the program that is either slanderous or libelous, I will be taking legal advice. So, you know, I've put the warning out there. And if they do, I don't think the BBC legal department is going to be stupid enough to allow them to say that I'm receiving money from Russia or from Syria, but you never know, you know. So yeah, I'm ready for it. But on the other hand, I think I said to you, I'm kind of excited about the program because I'm waiting for what it's going to bring out that I can then start to investigate even more, you know, because so many of these people are usually just kept in the shadows. You don't hear their names, you don't get to know who they are. But in order to kind of shore up James Le Mesurier's reputation, they're going to have to bring some of his school friends and some of his colleagues and, you know, his family members out into the open. So
just on a strictly human level, I want you to know that that is a very admirable approach to, you know, getting dragged into a smear fest by the BBC, that you're like, oh, I get to find new people to dig into and go after. Like, it would probably take me a while to calm myself down enough to get to that point to where I could be like, oh, okay, I can weaponize this in my favor.
Not a journalist though. Not a journalist.
Right. No, because you didn't go to King's College and you didn't fucking write for their little paper there. Yeah.
Yeah, all they've got left now is the block, isn't it? Really? You know?
Yeah.
Just push them to the point where block.
Oh, we lost another.
Oh no. Battery must have died.
I think we could start wrapping up if we wanted to.
By the way, the description has all of Vanessa's links, Eva's links. So support them if you can. Their Patreons are on there.
Should we start to close? I could go, Andrew.
Yeah, that's fine.
So my name is Kendra Christian, and you can follow me on Twitter at edebs13. I am also a founder of Denver Action to Free Assange, and you can follow us at DNB Free JA. And we also have a member who started a Facebook page for us, and that's Denver Free Assange. I just want to say thank you so much to Vanessa and Eva today. I mean, it's just, as I expected, I learned so much, and I just really, you know, thank you for everything that you're doing and bringing out the truth about what's going on in this war. And Allison, it's great to see you. I mean, I am inspired constantly by your work in London, and it's wonderful. And man, I can't wait to meet you under happy circumstances. So
yeah, it's going to be great.
Yeah, and
party's going to be great.
Yep, and I just realized that I probably should have had Allison close first. So sorry, guys. I get nervous and then do things that are stupid. So Allison, you go.
Okay, well, I'm Ali May 101234. 101234. That's right. Now it's a stupid Twitter handle, but on Twitter, and also on Instagram, we've got the Assange Collective, just Assange Collective on Instagram, and we'll be doing a lot more stuff. But you know, we've got a new. It's actually we're calling ourselves a collective now because we just want everyone. It's like totally open, and so yeah, some more to come on that.
Yeah, hook me up with Dave so we can do some more streaming.
Yes, I will. He had a little event today, so I might talk about that to you later. But yes, I definitely will. When I speak to him tonight, I'll tell him that you said that. What's your dog's name?
That's Gomez.
Gomez. I love little Jack Russells. They're so beautiful.
He's a little Chihuahua.
Oh, is he a Chihuahua? You can only see the head, so it looks a bit.
Yeah,
I've always thought that if
so.
Jack Russell Terriers could talk, they would sound like Joe Pesci.
Yeah. Probably, yeah.
Without a doubt.
I used to have one who was like hugging my neck all the time. He's so beautiful. Yeah.
Mm.
We should make Kendra close out twice too, because she jumped in.
Yep, Kendra's turn again.
Hi, I'm Kendra.
But
Great
no,
to be on the show, by the way.
thank you very much for joining
We
us.
need to
It was-
have
it
you
was a real
back,
pleasure.
Ali. I'm stoked that you can make it today. I'm really happy that the protests have received like kind of the Streisand effect, where just by dint of 50 cops showing up to chase you off, more people now have started to turn out as a result of that. I love it when it backfires on the empire that way. Makes me happy.
Everyone knows the
So
rules.
one of the things we have the power to do, even just using a cell phone, is to connect to stream your guys' protests. So I would love to coordinate, because every Saturday, usually while you guys are protesting, we're either getting ready.
I totally
or
just said that,
streaming.
Andrew.
What?
I totally just said that, Andrew.
Oh. I thought you I'm really dumb. My name's Andrew Smith. I would like to thank everybody for joining us. Sleepy Josh on the computer, Kimber with the awesome graphics. I look forward to seeing everybody on Tuesday at 9 p.m. Eastern time. We're going to be going through the Cassandra Fairbanks and Jennifer Robinson statements. So I really look forward to that. Yeah, you can find us on Twitter at action_4 Assange. Our call to actions are down below, but also on our website, action4assange.com.
I'm Steve Poikonnen, and I host a show called Slow News Day, which you can find on YouTube by typing Slow News Day Podcast into your search bar. I'm also on Rockfin and D Live, and that is where I recommend you watch the show. Motherfucking camera!
Kevin!
So I'm not even going to bother. At any rate, tomorrow, Charlie Robinson from Macroaggressions and Fiorella Isabel from the Combo Couch will be with me. It should be wonderful. I am really glad I didn't make a complete Muppet out of myself, because basically all of my journalistic crushes were on the show today. And yeah, I fucking love all of you, and we'll hopefully see you tomorrow. Good luck to us all.